Jayon Vishnu Pad Parvahangsa Varipadikacharya Astatharasi Srimade Divine Grace Abhay Charnarim Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Sri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Sri Rukmini Dwarkadish Ki Jai Sri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi Ki Jai Sri Gauranitai Ki Jai Gauda Premanand. All glories to the Sum of the Devotees. All glories to the Sum of the Devotees. All glories to the Sum of the Devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gaur. Ma'am Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastabhudare. Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharani Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastatari Shatari. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Alert, alert. Alert, alert. Bhagavatam class is starting. That was a citywide message. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 1, entitled Questions by Vidura. Text number 37. Kim va kritageshu agham atyamarshi bhimo hivad dirgatamam vyamunchat yasyangri patam ranabhur na sehe margam gadayash charato vichitram kimva kritage swagam atyamarshi kimva kritage swagam atyamarshi bhimo hiva dirgatamam vyamunchat bhimo hiva dirgatamam vyamunchat yasyangripatam ranabhurnase yasyangripatam ranabhurnase margam gatayascharato vichitram margam gatayascharato vichitram kimva kritage swagam atyamarshi bhimo hiva dirgatamam vyamunchat yasyangripatam ranabhurnase margam gatayascharato vichitram. Bhimo hiva dirgatamam vyamunchat Yasyangripatam ranabhunase Margam Gadayascharato Vichitram Vagritarshi Jagamatyamarshi Vimohiva Dirgatayam Pamunchat Jangripatam Ranabunase Margam Gadayascharato Vichitram. Ladies, Kim, whether, Va, either, Krita, performed, Ageshu, unto the sinners, Agham, angry, Ati Amarshi, unconquerable, Bhima, Ahivat, like a cobra, Dirgatamam, long cherished. Yamunchat, has released. Yasya, whose. Angripatam, putting on the steps. Ranabhu, the field of battle. Na, could not. Sehe, tolerate. Margam, the path. Gadaya, by the clubs. Charata, plain. Vichitram, wonderful. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Please tell me whether the unconquerable Bhima, who is like a cobra, has released his long-cherished anger upon the sinners. The field of battle could not tolerate even the wonderful playing of his club when he stepped on the path. Please repeat. Please tell me whether the unconquerable Bhima, who is like a cobra, has released his long-cherished anger upon the sinners. The field of battle could not tolerate even the wonderful playing of his club when he stepped on the path. Purport. Vidura knew the strength of Bhima. Whenever Bhima was on the battlefield, his steps on the path and the wonderful playing of his club were unbearable for the enemy. Powerful Bhima did not take steps against the sons of Dhritarashtra for a long time. Vidura's inquiry was whether he had yet released his anger, which was like that of a suffering cobra. When a cobra releases its venom after long-cherished anger, its victim cannot survive. Om Jnanatimidandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Sigurave Namo. Mugam Gorodivachalam Pangam Langayate Ginverkipitam Vande Siguram Tiranara Paramanda Madhavam Sri Chaitanyeshwaram. So we're continuing here with Vidura asking Maitreya various questions. He had just returned from his travels, and the battle of Kurukshetra had finished, wrapped up. So he's coming back and making some inquiry. And Srila Prabhupada points out here that Vidura knew the strength of Bhima. And of course this is very clearly documented, you could say, in the Mahabharata. And that we read or have heard started very early, when the Pandavas had gone to Hastinapur to live with their relatives, the Kauravas. Immediately when they came to the city, they were received very nicely by all of the residents. Everyone was very enlivened and impressed by their qualities. Their strength, their enthusiasm, their knowledge, their skill. Everyone was very impressed, except Duryodhana and a few of his close compadres, Dushashana, Karna. They were not very impressed. Instead, they were irritated. Duryodhana had previously been glorified by everyone as the apparent heir to the throne, so he was quite puffed up, you could say, by his position and his respect, as we see in society today, that as soon as someone gets a little bit of power, they're immediately corrupted. Immediately it gets to their head. Even a pauper, he's proud of his penny, Srila Prabhupada comments. Even a pauper who he's living off of some measly little earnings, but he's very proud of it. And I was always confused, actually. I remember the first time I went to India, I would see some of these rickshaw wallas with Brahman's threads, and I was mystified. What is this? And they were quite proud of it. So even, so we can understand that as soon as one gets a position and some fame, adoration, or distinction, immediately it has some negative effects upon the consciousness. So Duryodhana was like that he was glorified, and so he started his politicking, you could say, at a very early time. As soon as Prabhupada points out here the strength of Bhima. Bhima was quite strong, and Duryodhana, irritated by this, made some plan that let's poison him. We need to get rid of these competitors. So he invited the Pandavas to a feast after all of their sporting, because they would regularly sport, and the Pandavas would always win out. They would always defeat the Kauravas. And so let's, after our sporting today, we're going to have a very nice feast. So when everyone sat down, Duryodhana was careful to sit right next to Bhima, because he wanted to make sure that whatever Bhima was eating was poisoned. And so he fed him, they fed him. Bhima was very blissful. He kept on eating and eating and eating. And everyone was wondering, what's going on here? Bhima's eating and everyone is, and then afterwards they have some wrestling. So he's still going, but by evening time, the son of Vayu began to feel some tiredness, and he fell asleep. So Duryodhana and Dushashan took the opportunity, and they bound Bhima up in ropes and threw him in, rolled him. They couldn't throw him, he was too big. But they rolled him into the Ganga, and he sank. And as he was sinking, the serpents which were there in the river began to bite him. And because of their biting, it counteracted the poison that Bhima had been given. He'd eaten enough poison to kill 100 men. So when the serpents were biting him, it neutralized, it acted as an antidote to the poison. And the residents of the lower regions, the Nagas, they were observing this. So they were quite mystified. Who is this personality? He's bound, and Bhima's coming out of his poisoned state, you could say. And so they take him to Vasuki, who is the lord of the Nagas, the lower regions. And Vasuki knew who Bhima was, and he knew what had happened. Such personalities such as Vasuki and some of the other celestial beings, they have this vision that they're able to see what transpired. So they decided that they would give him some nectar. And so they gave him the nectar, celestial soma, and from that, Bhima developed the strength of 10,000 men, 10,000 elephants. I was always curious, how is it that Bhima became so strong? But he was actually given the nectar by Vasuki, and from that he became very powerful, a powerful warrior. So after that he came out of the Ganga and he went back to Hastinapur, and everyone was wondering, where is Bhima? And here he comes, he's running along. He's running along the path, running to the city, to the gates. He's just on his way. He was a very gregarious personality, and this is what very much irked Duryodhana. So they were, again, very amazed. How is it that Bhima was able to survive this poisoning? So throughout the Mahabharata, there's so many very nice descriptions of Bhima. He happens to play a very prominent part throughout the Mahabharata for some amazing reason. Whether it was the poisoning or whether it was the house of lack, right? When the Pandavas were sent to Varanavata by Duryodhana on the plea of some state visit, why don't you go out to this district, this area? And we have a very nice place for you there. We'll construct a very nice place for you. And you can enjoy the countryside, and you can associate and give your guidance to the residents. So on the plea of a state visit, you should go. But Yudhisthira understood that there's some intrigue going on here. He could understand by his intelligence that this is something's not right here. And it was confirmed when they walked into the house. It smelled like lack. What is going on here? This is not right. This house smells. If anyone's ever been in a place where after they do some varnishing, you can see that the smell is so strong. Shamurari knows. He and others were doing Govinda's benches, and it's a very terrible smell. So Yudhisthira understood that there's something going on here. And then Vidura, because he had spies in the palace, began to speak to Yudhisthira in the language of the Mlechas. I don't know what that language is, if anyone knows. But well, we know that even in our dealings, sometimes people want to jive a lot. So he began to jive with some jive talk to Yudhisthira. And because Yudhisthira understood languages, he understood many languages. He could understand this language that Vidura was using. Vidura began by speaking to him, advising him that one who knows that there are sharp weapons capable of cutting the body, although not made of metal, is not injured by them. It's a very important instruction. That one who knows there are sharp weapons capable of cutting the body, although not made of metal, is not injured by them. Now, what does that mean? It means that there's words that can be used to disturb one. Just like we have experience. Politicians, they sometimes use a lot of cutting words. Isn't it? We have immediate experience in our political culture right now. That people use cutting words just to denigrate and disturb and offend others in so many different ways. So one who knows this kind of language, or sees or is aware of this kind of weapon, because it is a weapon. When people start talking to each other, they sometimes they make fun of this person or that person. And even do it in public before thousands and tens of thousands of people, making fun of someone who may have some handicap, say, or maybe of a different color, or a different religion, or a different skin color. They make these low-class, dogged words, and it's penetrating. It hurts. We all have experience of that. But one who's aware of them is not disturbed by them. If you're aware that this is simply low-class conversation. These words are, what is that? Sticks and stones may hurt my bones, but words will never hurt me. Sticks and stones may hurt my bones, that's for sure, right? You may get into a fight, but if the body may be injured, but what really hurts is somebody's words. That's very, very penetrating. So if one is aware of such things, then he's not injured by them. In other words, if one is keeping a higher level of consciousness. And then he goes on to describe, to instruct Yudhisthira that he survives who understands that the consumer of wood and straw does not reach the dwellers of a hole in the forest. Have you ever been in an area that's been burned out by a forest fire? The only ones that survive are the ones who dig a hole. The only ones that survive are the little critters who are able to dig a nice deep hole and the fire can't reach them. Even in times of great disaster, it's always recommended that you have a cellar, right? You have a cellar under your house so that when the tornado comes, it blows away the house, but it doesn't blow you away. Or if that were a nuclear issue, where do you go? You go underground. So he survives who understands that the consumer of wood and straw does not reach the dwellers of a hole in the forest. And again, then he instructed, always stay alert. Always stay alert. Because, again, padam padam yadabhibudam natesham. These instructions are straight out of the Bhagavatam. Straight out of the Bhagavad Gita. He's describing to Maharaj Yudhisthira, Dharmaraj, that stay alert. There's many enemies. And Krishna says that also, right? Kama esha krodha esha rajaguna samudbhava. He says that there are so many different enemies that one has to be Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. One has to be aware of all these different enemies, which are always trying to penetrate our defenses. So always stay alert. And one who keeps his senses under control is never overcome by any enemy. One who keeps his senses under control is never overcome by any enemy. So if you control your mind and senses, as Rupa Goswami very nicely instructs us, right? Vachavegam manasarkodavegam chivegam udarapastavegam. The other day, Maharaj was giving a class, Sagar Maharaj, and he was talking about fish. It was interesting that it's one of the, it's the first sign on Lord Krishna's lotus feet, on the heel, the fish. And the fish is interesting because, and Prabhupada uses the example of the fish in another place where he describes one who's, how if one is not controlling the senses, it means perishing. It means your certain death if you don't control your senses. And the example is given of the fish, who because of his uncontrolled tongue, immediately wants to bite the bait. Prabhupada gives this example. The fish, he's so controlled by his tongue, as soon as he sees the opportunity, he bites onto the hook, and he's finished. So Rupa Goswami explains, Vacha Vega Manasar. The first thing is to control your tongue. If you want to advance in spiritual life, the first thing is to control your tongue. Control your eating and your speaking. So keeping one's senses under control means that one will never be conquered by any enemy. So these instructions were given by Vidura, knowing the strength again of Bhima, and knowing the intelligence that was there of the different sons of Pandu, there was a better chance that they would be able to survive and deal with the constant oppression that was there from Duryodhana. I mentioned earlier that there were some other instances of Bhima's strength given in the Mahabharata. There's the poison incident, the House of Black, the Hidimba, after the Pandavas had escaped from the House of Black. Bhima, he was so strong and powerful that he was able to carry everyone through the tunnel, which had been constructed by Vidura's assistance into the forest. So when they got into the forest, everyone was exhausted. So what to do? They couldn't go any further. So Bhima carried everyone on his own shoulders until finally they were in a secure place. And then, of course, there's the incident of the Hidimba, the Rakshasa, Hidimbi, who became attracted to Bhima. She changed her form into a very beautiful woman and was able to speak to the sons. And as she was speaking to Bhima, Hidimba comes, her brother, and then there's a battle. And we know what the outcome of that was, right? Bhima was so powerful that he punched in the legs and arms and head of Hidimba into the torso of the Rakshasa, and everyone was taken back. Oh, who could have done such a thing? And then afterwards, there's again another incident where he's fighting the Rakshasa Baka. And I think that was a story where he had the cart, right? There was a cart of food he was to take to this Rakshasa, because this Rakshasa was oppressing this village, and he volunteered. Because he was also volunteered by his mother. Was it? Or by Yudhisthira? Yeah, Yudhisthira volunteered Bhima. That you get on the cart here. You go on with the cart to Baka, where he's at, and deliver this food, and that way the villagers won't be constantly eaten by this Rakshasa, but on the way he ate the food. And he was still eating when Baka came, and he was so disturbed. What is this? Who dared to eat my food? And they got into a fight, and he, of course, killed Baka. So whenever Bhima was on the battlefield, as is explained here, his steps on the path and wonderful playing of his club were unbearable for the enemy. And there's so many wonderful descriptions given there, how he was able to subjugate kings in all different directions, how he was very reactive when Dushashana offended Draupadi. He was the only one that stepped up and was ready to fight. He was so passionate, and then of course there's so many wonderful descriptions of how he fought during the battle. But one very interesting point here that Prabhupada makes also was whether he had released his anger, which was like that of a suffering cobra. There's a very nice, interesting amusing story that Jayapataka Maharaj told me one time of an Englishman who was in India. And as he was there, he came in contact with a cobra. And he killed it. And he was scheduled to leave. Very shortly after that, he packed up his bags and he flew back to England. And when he opened up his bag, another cobra came out of it and killed him. He was in India. He had killed a cobra, packed up his bags, flew back home. When he opened up his bags, a second cobra came out and bit him and killed him. It's understood that cobras like to travel in pairs. So the second cobra, its mate, saw within the eyes of its dead mate the picture of the person who killed it. So it found out, or it trailed, or it somehow or other was able to manage its way into the luggage. So when he opened it, and as Prabhupada points out here, when a cobra releases its venom after long cherished anger, its victim cannot survive. It did not forget. Just like Bhima did not forget. He didn't forget what Dushasana had done. And he pledged, he made a vow that he would drink his blood. And when he did that on the battlefield, everybody was terrified. Even on the side of the Pandavas, the soldiers, when they saw what Bhima was doing, they dropped their weapon. Karna just froze when they saw his actions. Bhima vowed that he would kill the sons, and that he would also kill Duryodhana, which he did. So it's a very interesting experience and story and description Srila Prabhupada gives here, and we can understand that these personalities, the Pandavas, and for that matter, the character of a devotee can never be what would the word be? Misunderstood or not underestimated. They can do great things. The Pandavas did great things, and Srila Prabhupada also did such great things to give us this wonderful Krishna conscious movement and this wonderful knowledge. So when there are any questions or comments? Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.